Welcome to the CHCI Fall Tech Summit panel, Leading the Way, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Technology. This session is made possible by the generous contributions of our sponsors, Dell Technologies, DoorDash, Microsoft, Netflix, ServiceNow, and SoftBank Group. Our panel host for today is Congressman Joaquin Castro, representing Texas's 20th Congressional District. Now in his fourth term, Congressman Castro serves on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, as well as the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Education and Labor Committee. We have welcoming remarks from Pete Corona, Director of Original Series at Netflix. Our moderator for today's session is Joseph S. Miller, Esquire, Founder, President, Chief Executive Officer, and Founding Board Chair of the Washington Center for Technology Policy Inclusion, the nation's first organization focused exclusively on diversity and inclusion in technology public policy making. Please welcome our opening remarks speaker, Congressman Joaquin Castro, followed by Pete Corona.
Hi, I'm Joaquin Castro, and I represent my hometown of San Antonio, Texas, in the U.S. House of Representatives. Welcome to CHCI's Tech Summit, and thank you for participating in today's panel, Leading the Way, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Technology. This is an incredibly timely conversation. For generations, the United States has been a global leader in technology and innovation, but for far too long, the tech sector has mostly excluded the Latino community. In fact, it was recently reported that Latino, Black, and Native American workers account for less than 5% of the tech industry, despite Latinos being nearly 20% of the population, as you all know. I view the exclusion of Latinos within industries, including the tech sector, as a fundamental issue for all Americans. This is why conversations like the one today are an important step to addressing this challenge and closing the gap. Because in the new digital era, underrepresentation of Latinos in the workforce can have serious consequences, not only online, but in our communities. Tech companies like Facebook, unfortunately, have allowed misinformation, negative stereotypes, and the demonization of Latinos to spread rampantly. And misinformation, particularly targeted towards Latinos and in Spanish, hardly ever gets scrutinized. In the extreme, this can lead to terrible tragedies, like the one in El Paso, Texas, where a madman drove 10 hours to stop what he called the, quote, Hispanic invasion of Texas. A lack of diversity and inclusion is dangerous to the Latino community. And as I mentioned earlier, dangerous for all Americans. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can break the barriers, rewrite the rules, and empower Latinos to lead in the tech industry. And this panel is a wonderful opportunity to advance this conversation and rally our community for change. Thank you for all of your hard work. I hope you enjoy the panel.
I am Pete Corona, Director of Original Series at Netflix. I'd like to welcome you to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute's breakout session, Leading the Way, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Technology. First, I'd like to thank Representative Castro and the CHCI for having me here today to speak on such an important topic. At Netflix, we believe that people should see their lives reflected on screen and that great stories can come from anywhere and be loved everywhere. Better representation on screen starts with better representation behind the camera and across entertainment companies. To understand how we're doing today so we can drive change in the future, we asked Dr. Stacy Smith at USC Annenberg to review Netflix US films and series. This is the first comprehensive independent inclusion report any US entertainment company has produced. To drive change, we need to bring an inclusion lens to our work. That means asking whose voices are missing, embracing difference, understanding our biases, and recognizing that great stories are universal. They can come from anywhere and anyone, irrespective of their gender, sexuality, or ethnicity, and be loved everywhere. We're committed to building a legacy of inclusion. We hope to drive lasting change at Netflix and across the industry by being transparent about our progress and creating a Netflix fund for creative equity that invests $100 million over 5 years in more opportunities for people from underrepresented communities. One of the first programs we funded through our Creative Equity Fund supports the National Association of Latino Independent Producers, or NALI, and their narrative short film incubator for women of color. This incubator will help Latinx women and women of color produce short film projects through dedicated funding, production support, and mentorship. For the Los Angeles Latino International Film Festival, or LALIFF, we supported their inaugural Latinx Inclusion Fellowship Series, which mentors Afro-Latinx directors, and where we are renewing our partnership with the Latino Film Institute to include the program for a second year, which will include Indigenous Latinx filmmakers to the cohort. And recently, we partnered with Latinx in animation and writer-director Jorge Gutierrez from our newly released series, Maya and the Three, to present a Writing for Animation Masterclass at this year's LALIFF. This masterclass was designed to prepare emerging Latinx writers with the necessary skills to land their first writing gig. Those are just some examples of recent efforts that I've personally been involved in at Netflix, and which I'm so proud to be part of. And there is more work to be done, and I'm excited and committed and to help continuing to forge this path. I believe in the work that the CHCI is doing, and I'm so honored to be part of it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Miller, and I'm founder and CEO of Washing Tech, the inclusive voice of tech policy. You can find our podcast, Tech Policy, wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can text CHCI to 72572, and we'll send you a link to that. That's CHCI to 72572. Don't wait. If we're going to change the narrative on tech policy, we have to join forces everywhere. That's CHCI to 72572. CHCI to 72572. So we have an amazing panel here today, here to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in tech, a major topic here in America and really across the world as we think about who's designing the algorithms that will define not just the internet, but wait for it, the metaverse. Here we go with the metaverse. I know it, Web 3.0, I think is what they're calling it. Or is it 3 or 4? We have an amazing panel today, but first and foremost, Congressman Castro, it's an honor to be in a position to thank you for joining us. You are a titan in this space, and I'm personally appreciative of your exceptional work, and all of us thank you for your remarks today. And thank you, of course, Pete Corona, for showing us how to do this. We need you, man, so thanks for showing up for us here today and for your opening remarks, sir. We appreciate you. Thank you, CHCI, for having us here today. The impact of technology on the Latino community cannot be overstated. It poses enormous constitutional challenges for this community. And a lot's gone into planning this event. So Kim Sesko is absolutely phenomenal. You should see how detailed and organized she and her team are. Agile, I think, is what we're calling it now. What an exceptional project leader. Thank you so much, Kim. You're world class, and to your entire team, really exceptional work. Panelists, welcome. It's wonderful to see you. Thanks for joining us in this discussion, in particular, as we look under the hood to see that it's ultimately people who are running these technologies. And if they don't reflect the diversity of this nation and the world, how can they possibly apply empathy when they're developing these algorithms? First up, please welcome Tanya Williams, Head of External Affairs at SoftBank Group International. She's an innovative strategist and public policy professional with extensive public and private sector experience.
Hi, Joe, and everyone here. Thanks so much for having me today. Really excited to join you and CHCI and this great panel to talk about diversity in tech and tech adjacent sectors, issues that are really important, as you've said today. First of all, while I have you here, I just want to, for those of you who aren't familiar with SoftBank, SoftBank is a global investment firm. We invest venture capital dollars in tech-enabled companies around the world, but our focus is mainly here in the US, and we've invested in tons of companies and have a number of funds, one of which we'll talk about today, which is the Opportunity Fund. So really excited to be here with you to talk about diversity in tech and all these issues that have gained a lot of attention since the murder of George Floyd. And as we continue to talk about long-term value creation, which has to include the diverse perspective and people in the United States. So thank you so much. Looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tanya. Next, let's welcome Gustavo Ariaga. He is the Southwest lead for the Microsoft Philanthropies TEALS Technology Education and Literacy in Schools program.
Hi, Joseph, and hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be here to share a little bit about what Microsoft is doing all up to address racial equity, and then talk a little bit also about some of the specific programs in Microsoft Philanthropies, of which the program that Joseph mentioned, the Technology Education and Literacy in Schools program, or TEALS, is part of. We've been addressing equitable computer science issues across the country for about 10 years now, and now working with over 500 schools across 31 states, having served over 93,000 students by partnering classroom teachers with tech industry volunteers to team teach inclusive computer science classes. That program has recently expanded, and it's just one of many efforts that we're taking part in to address racial equity. And that expansion is part of a larger commitment that was announced by Satya Nadella in June of 2020 to address racial equity along three axes: by increasing representation and culture of inclusion, by engaging our ecosystem of suppliers and partners, and by strengthening our communities through our work with TEALS, and also increasing support for HBCUs, expanding access to broadband, which we've seen through the pandemic is a huge issue, digital access, and increasing technology support for nonprofits supporting and led by people of color. All of this great work is part of many, many, many efforts that are ongoing. And at the end of the day, I'm excited to talk to you about what Microsoft is doing, but I think we also need to realize that each of our companies are deeply engaged in issues that are directly impacting us and that we have direct access to, but none of us can do this alone. Preparing generations of Hispanic youth for a digitally transforming economy and meeting them where they are will require an industry-wide effort and a good bit of policy work to secure all of our mutual progress. So I'm excited to talk about those broader issues, share what we're doing, and learn from everybody else on the panel.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gustavo. Our next panelist is Jennifer Bosick, Director of Strategic Alliances at ServiceNow. Jennifer mentors and develops Latinx talent into reaching and fulfilling their own professional goals. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, Joe. Thank you. And welcome everyone that's watching. Again, I'm Jennifer Bosick. I'm also the Director of Strategic Alliances at ServiceNow. I also manage our strategic partnership with Microsoft. I'm also the global co-lead of our first ever Latinx Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging group at ServiceNow, which we created in June of 2020. I'm also first generation Peruana, Peruvian American, happy to be here representing as a Latina. A bit about ServiceNow. We're a software company. We're based in Santa Clara, Silicon Valley. We develop a cloud platform to really help companies manage digital workflows. And similar to some of the other panelists, we created a 5-point DIBS plan in June of 2020 when we created our diversity, inclusion, and belonging groups. And this comes all the way from Bill, our CEO, who is passionate about this topic, about diversity and equity and creating action. That's really what we're about, is not just having a plan, but acting on that plan throughout the company. And DIBS is a major force in that. And I'll talk a little bit later about our DIBS plans, but definitely want to target our workforce training program, Equity for All, bringing a voice within the company, which is what I do through our global program of Latinx at Now, and would love to talk more about the programs that we host and how we create not only equity in the company, but really developing pipeline of talent, of Latinx talent coming into our workforce and in the industry overall. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Finally, I'm pleased to, thank you, Jennifer. I'm pleased to introduce Asha Hope, Global Head of DEI at DoorDash, where she's responsible for developing and driving the implementation of DoorDash's DEI strategy, including the integration of DEI into core people and business processes along the employee lifecycle.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thank
Asha.
you so much. Hi, thank you. Welcome everyone today. I am thrilled to be a part of this discussion and represent DoorDash, as we believe that DoorDash has diversity, equity, and inclusion as a technology company. It's a part of our core DNA. So all the way from the infancy of our company, where we have immigrant founders, all the way threaded throughout our organization, we are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it didn't just start in 2020 when we were thinking about in the U.S. We started as a company in the early ages of our company and focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So really thrilled to have this discussion with the other panelists, and enjoy the conversation today.
And Asha, thank you. Welcome, panel. Again, thank you for joining us. And you, our audience, are the engine here. So head over to Twitter and give us a shout. Give us a lot of them, too. The hashtag is CHCI Summit, CHCI Summit. And hit me up in the chat box. We need your questions. Good looking out. So we will turn it to our questions now, and starting with Tanya. Tanya, what is the role from your perspective that you see D&I playing in your organization?
So, like many organizations, SoftBank has been taking a deeper look at diversity within our organization and within the venture capital system at large since the murder of George Floyd. Following that event, our CEO challenged all of us in an open letter to do better and to be a better employer, to be a better investor, and a better partner on D&I issues. And of course, that starts at home. So one of the things that we did was we got right to doing what SoftBank does best, which is invest capital in companies. And which is a $100 million vehicle for investing in tech-enabled companies that are led or founded by Black, Latinx, and Native American entrepreneurs. And it's a visible sign of what we have been doing. And we have just, since it was launched, we've been overwhelmed by the response. And it's really showing that when you are intentional about and investing in entrepreneurs who've been underrepresented in venture capital, you can really make great strides. That they're out there, that there isn't a pipeline problem. They just need an opportunity to have their companies, their amazing companies, evaluated. And there are a lot of barriers to that in venture capital that we have also been working to address. So since our launch, we've invested more than half of the capital in more than 60 companies. About half of them are Latinx. We have Latinx founders, and they're doing great. We've built a lot of momentum by opening the funnel, so no warm introductions needed. People can even apply right through the website, which is one of the barriers to accessing capital that we're trying to address. And it's been great. As I said, the companies are doing wonderfully. About half of them have raised or are raising their next round, which is pretty incredible. And we are building momentum, not just for us, but for others in the venture capital sector. So pretty exciting. Beyond that, we also have an accelerator program called Emerge, which focuses on a more diverse group of founders. We have invested, we have an $8 billion fund where we are investing in countries in LATAM, which is really exciting. A lot of work in the earlier stage, which is different for SoftBank. But for our founders, we think it's great. Not only are they getting the capital, but they're also getting the ecosystem, which is really important. The wraparound that you would get from any SoftBank company would get, any of our portfolio companies, whether we're investing $100,000 or $100 million. You get access to our global network of experts and operators and all of the advice and connections that come with that. So really excited about that, as well as our internal efforts looking at talent, networking, training, and obviously the work that I do, which is external engagement. So really thinking about communities and other stakeholders that we need to bring into the conversation. So it's been really, really an exciting effort, and just glad to work for a company that just is really jumped in with both feet and thinks a lot about this and realizes that there's no silver bullet, and we're learning and growing as we continue to do this work. So excited about what we've done, but really excited about what we're going to do in the future as well.
And I think it'd be a good idea to open up that question to everyone, for everyone to give their perspective on what diversity and equity means for your organization. You can kind of build on that and give some real world examples of successful programs that your companies are doing. So we'll start with Gustavo and move to Jennifer, and then Asha, and then just I feel probably about a minute, 60 seconds for each panelist, and then we'll move to questions directed specifically for each of you.
Sorry. Hey. Yeah. So, diversity is an intrinsic part of the world around us, right? And that's especially true for global companies like Microsoft. And inclusion and exclusion are ways that people and organizations can respond to that diversity. These are largely questions about the optimal distributions of people, right? And we've made some commitments as part of that racial equity commitment. One of those commitments was to double the number of Black and African American and Hispanic Latino people managers across the company by 2025. And one of the ways that we hold ourselves accountable for that is to publish our diversity and inclusion report every year, which is available publicly, and shows the progress that we're making towards that. Significant progress just in 1 year since that commitment was made. Already well on our way. I think about 25% of the way there for Latin, Hispanic, and Latino people managers. So really great progress there. Also, developing and engaging our ecosystem, as I mentioned before, working with our banking partners and suppliers to really increase the spend there and strengthen our partnerships with those businesses that are owned by groups that are historically excluded from tech or underrepresented. And then the part that's particularly relevant to my program is the investment in strengthening our communities, right? Part of that is significant increase in access to broadband through our airband program in many communities that have been, especially rural communities. A lot of Hispanic and Latino communities are in rural agricultural areas, especially early immigrant communities, first generation communities. So making sure they have connectivity and then use that connectivity to skill up, through programs like TEALS that are bringing computer science to those communities so that they can leverage the connectivity to skill up and access, train up, and then access the opportunities to participate equitably in the digital future that are made available by those new skills that they've acquired. So yeah, I think there are many pieces of the puzzle, right? Part of that is making sure that once people get into our companies, they have the training and the opportunities to grow and move up. But then also that, as people are moving up, we're refreshing that pool by building a broad ecosystem to help Hispanic and Latino youth train and get ready to capture those opportunities no matter where they are, because as we know, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not, right? So making sure that those align is a large part of what we're doing to keep that pipeline refreshed.
So Jennifer, tell us about that. What from your perspective are sort of the touch points here that folks should be focused on as they seek to make the types of genuine efforts to engage and empower folks?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joe, you actually mentioned something in your introduction that I wanted to hit upon, and it's about having empathy. You mentioned that word, and that's really important to us at ServiceNow, is creating the sense of empathy across the company with situations that, our community is facing, especially during the pandemic, and creating action across the company to address it. I mentioned the 5-point DIBS plan, and one of those is our workforce training program. So we have something called our DIBS Leadership Summit, and with nearly 200 leaders that are directors and higher, we give them training to basically challenge their unconscious bias and encourage allyship. We're very big on incorporating allies, especially into, for example, our Latinx DIBS group. And we have over 500 members, and it's not just about those that identify as Latinx, but those that want to join the journey with us in terms of education on the issues we face as a community, what they could do to support as an ally. And that's a very big topic for us. For this DIBS Leadership Summit, we actually use technologies like augmented reality to go through real world use cases on unconscious bias. And the goal is to help leaders really become agents to dismantle injustice in the workplace and really be an equitable place for everyone among their teams. The other program I want to talk about is giving employees a voice. That's also one of our 5 points, really fostering a sense of belonging and space for real conversations. For example, in our Latinx DIBS group, we brought in speakers to talk about gender violence, which is a very important topic, very sensitive topic, really creating that community and that space for the folks that are Latinx or allies to be able to have real conversations within the company and have this sense of community and support. Realizing that we need programs to reduce attrition, we also have a mentor and protege program that we just launched this year. We realize that I'm first generation. There's plenty of first generation here in the country, that first generation to go to college, first generation to work in corporate America. And that transition can be hard, and attrition can be high for that group of employees, especially in the Latinx space. Having a mentoring and protege program where we have leaders mentor our early in career is important so that they stay in tech and get the skills and the guidance, mentorship that they need to overcome things like imposter syndrome, getting the coaching they need to realize where they can progress in their careers and stay in the tech industry, whether it's at ServiceNow or elsewhere. And so those are some examples of what we're doing to really create this community, this sense of belonging, but also have the hard conversations and address them head on.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is tough to hear that a lot with folks. And the best way I can think of to deal with it is to watch something funny before you go to an event or somewhere where you feel like you're
Yeah,
socially.
that's a good idea.
Asha, do you have any? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, so I definitely have something to add. So I would say at DoorDash, we are definitely committed to increasing the visibility of women, specifically women of underrepresented groups in every part of the DoorDash community. So that includes employees, that includes merchants, that includes our dashers and our customers. So one specific program I like to speak of is our Made by Women program for women-owned merchants. So what that really is a program that provides resources and tools for our women-owned merchants to become the best business owners that they can possibly become. So whatever those tools are, DoorDash helps them to really upskill their business, upskill their entrepreneurship, and be, like I said, the best that they can be from a business owner perspective. I'd like to highlight is our program called Elevate, which was really birthed out of the lack of women, specifically underrepresented women, Black and Latino women in DoorDash leadership. So a lot of times when a company is in its infancy phases, you focus on recruiting as your DEI lever. But our first priority at DoorDash was to focus on leadership. So this Elevate program was really created to accelerate the level of leadership for women, Black, Latina women across the business. So that program, after the first 6 months of the inaugural program, 38% of women were promoted after being in that program. So we all know that is unheard of for after 6 months of a program for people or women to be promoted. So we're very proud of that program, and it continues to elevate and accelerate women today.
I love that. I love that. So Jennifer and Asha, how do you get executive sponsorship on DEI programs? what's the level of commitment at the top, needed to ensure success, and how do you hold folks accountable for the support that you offer them?
Yeah, well, I can speak
Support
to.
that you offer mentees.
Sure, absolutely. When we created our Latinx Dibs group, we were blessed to have executive sponsors support us since the beginning. And one of the things I always talk about is, we can have a very passionate group of Latinx within the company as a board, create all these ideas, but a lot of times the ideas and things that we want to implement have never been done before within the company. And that is why it is so essential that our success is based on having these executive sponsors at the top to support these initiatives, be a voice, and advocate for the change and action that we want. It's also providing the funding, right? A lot of times what we want to do is to create programs to donate to nonprofits, to partner with other organizations, and funding is part of that. So it's really about finding sponsors and executives, if they're not already aligned to you from the beginning of a DIBS group or creation of an ERG, it's finding executives that really believe in your mission, that share the same values and are in it for the right reasons. And you can tell, right, in working with these executives, how committed and passionate they are on this journey and wanting to be on this journey with us, because we really can't execute in a bubble, and having that voice of executives advocating for us all the way and showing up is really telling. And you can see that throughout the activities. For example, at ServiceNow during Hispanic Heritage Month, we invited a guest speaker, and our executive sponsors were able to do the interview, to have the dialogue and conversation, and really bring forth across the company what the stories are that we want to tell as a Latinx community within the company. And when allies or folks that aren't allies yet see executives talking and having these conversations, engaging, it encourages more to be on this journey with us. So I think it's absolutely imperative to have executive sponsorship at the top, from the CEO to the sponsors that you have helping with your organization, whether it's an ERG or part of, essentially diversity and inclusion groups. It's really key to be able to open doors and help get their support in the journey.
Wonderful. And so how do you measure that? Sorry, Asha. Go ahead.
Okay. You want Jennifer to answer the measure?
No, that'd be great. Yeah, if you can tell us about how to maintain accountability for these sponsorships of mentees, and then also if you could just tell us how to maintain accountability and build it and make it sustainable over the long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that question is, the second part of that is directed specifically to you, Asha.
Okay. Sure, I'll quickly jump in on that. So in terms of the executive sponsorship accountability, we have a great relationship with our exec sponsors. We meet with them on a monthly basis to go through what we're creating, what we're trying to do, programs that we're initiating, where we need their support, and asks of them to participate. It's also going back on establishing what our goals are for the year. What are we really trying to do in terms of metrics, recruiting programs, as I mentioned, the mentoring program that we created, and going back and checking in on a monthly basis with where we're at. And it's also them holding us accountable as a DIBS group to create these opportunities and to break down doors and to overcome some of the obstacles that sometimes these groups have within companies to create these opportunities. So it's having the dialogue, and when you have those values and you are committed up front with those discussions, then it's easier to hold each other accountable in the process. Asha, over to you.
Asha.
All right. Thank you. So I will say at DoorDash, we don't shy away from holding ourselves accountable, holding our leaders accountable. And we like to say we get 1% better every day. So that's one of our 12 DoorDash values that we even anchor on from a DEI perspective. But what we say is that we created what we call a DEI accountability mechanism. And this is a tool or a mechanism for our director level and above leaders to hold them accountable for building inclusive teams and having diversity, equity, and inclusion practices every day. So much that if there is a promotion available or leadership movement available for director level and above, they are looked at from a DEI track record perspective and held according to this DEI mechanism before they're able to be promoted. So I think that is a huge way in which we hold our leaders accountable and hold a mirror to their level of leadership, their inclusive leadership behaviors, to make sure that we are modeling the behaviors that we want to see. So that's one of the things that we do every day at DoorDash. In addition to that, we believe that, transparency helps us with accountability as well. So just recently, we, for the first time as a company, announced DEI commitments, 2025 commitments for representation of underrepresented groups as well as women. In addition to that, we have now externally placed our DEI data on our website. So again, a level of transparency to say, hey, we're not where we want to be, but we are committed to our DEI journey. We are committed to getting 1% better every day, and we're holding ourselves and our leaders accountable.
I love that. 1% accountability each day is fantastic.
1% better every day.
What did I say? Did I say something different? 1%. Are you repeating what okay, I thought I said the wrong thing. Sometimes I do that.
You
Gustavo, we haven't heard.
Yeah, it's 1% better every day.
1%. There we go.
Yep.
That's like atomic habits, right?
Yep.
Gustavo, we haven't heard from you, and I'd love to hear more about how you're thinking about pipeline issues. And let's face it, a lot of times we're asking folks to create a pipeline, and they don't have any background, they don't have any exposure to being in diverse communities, or even having training in this area. So what are some things that folks should, and Tanya, this is relevant for you as well. What are some of the issues here? And I'd just love to kind of sit back and hear your thoughts on this. You're on mute again.
Sorry, that's a fantastic question. And, I think, I part of this DEI work, a lot of us get a lot of training, right? We do workshops, we do working groups, we bring in people who are experts in this to help us learn and make progress on our racial equity journey. And one of the things that I learned through some of this training is the importance of shared language, right? So that we're all talking about the same thing. And I think it's important to realize that there is no pipeline for Latinos in tech, right? The pipeline implies that if you put something in one end, you can be reasonably sure that it'll come out the other end, right? There's an A to B. And what we have is less of a pipeline and more of an American Ninja Warrior obstacle course, right? Where at every step of the way, there's another hurdle that needs to be cleared to get to the next step on the journey, right? So I think, there are some things that we can all do and all agree that are kind of fundamental to getting people into one end. And then there's a lot of work that needs to be done, frankly, to make sure that people keep progressing through that and get out the other end, right? So on the front side, I think education is foundational, right? So the saying used to be that reading is fundamental. I think for the future economy, computer science is fundamental. Computer science education is fundamental. So for the entry point to that, hopefully future pipeline, we're really, really focusing heavily on making sure that there's equitable access and equitable participation in foundational computer science education. That is what is going to build the base for every step that comes after that, right? And we've thankfully have some pretty good success to report here. Our flagship program for that is the TEALS program, the Technology Education and Leadership in Schools program. 25% of those 500 plus schools that we're supporting this academic year are majority Hispanic, which is fantastic, right? 30% of those students at TEALS supported schools, 30% of the students are Hispanic. If you look at the students who are actually enrolling in those classes, 29% of the students enrolling in those computer science classes are Hispanic. And if you look at the females, the Latinas enrolled in those classes, it's even higher. It's 32%, which is, way, way, way ahead of the curve in terms of female and Latino participation in the tech industry. So that's providing, again, that foundation. We're doing good work and making good progress there. There are still some gaps to be closed. One of the really concerning data points in the recently published State of Computer Science report that was released by code.org and prepared in collaboration with a lot of partners across the computer science education advocacy space, was that Latinos are the remaining ethnic racial group that still lags in terms of participation versus their overall representation in the student body. So there's a gap that we need to close there, but again, we are making good progress. And we need to make sure that as we're filling, as we're getting people into the pipeline, we're getting very, very talented Hispanic and Latino students into that pipeline, or into the one end of the pipeline, that they're not leaking out as they go through, right? So even if your purview is in education, right, everybody has a role to play along that line, whether it's making sure that they have access to internships or apprenticeships, right? Whether they have support for making that hurdle to get an interview and doing well on the interview, whether there's equitable access to promotion opportunities for retention that was mentioned before, right? All of these things are important, and we need to make sure that we are connecting the dots. There are a lot of dots, and lots of us are working on individual parts of it, but we need to make sure that we're working together to connect them so that students have a pathway forward and aren't hitting obstacles at every step of the way.
We've got less than 4 minutes, so Tanya, I definitely want to hear your perspective on this, the venture capital perspective on this quote unquote pipeline.
Sure, I'll keep it quick so we can get to questions. Really excited about that. So first of all, pipeline has sort of a dual meaning for us in venture capital. First of all, we have a pipeline, which means the people who are coming in that we're evaluating to determine whether or not it's a company that we want to invest in. And secondly, the pipeline, as in the more traditional sense of what you're talking about, which is talent related. So first of all, I'll take the entrepreneurial pipeline for companies that we want to invest in. And I'll tell you right now, the great news is that there's not a problem. Since we announced the launch of our fund, we had over 1,700 founders who have submitted, which is incredible. And we've evaluated just amazing companies. Wish we could fund them all, but we can't. We're trying our best to match them in different places and help them to develop as they, if they're not in a place where they're ready for venture capital funding, just quite yet. And so it's just been incredible. So we want to put that to bed right now. Like, there is not a pipeline problem. So we need to go and look elsewhere and talk about the other things, the other barriers that are really the problem. And it's just not that. You have to be intentional. You have to be creative. If you can't be if you're not as intentional as you should be. And I think we're doing both at SoftBank. So that's really exciting. In terms of talent, there certainly are issues there to address. A number of them, Gustavo mentioned, it's education, it's exposure in some instances. Venture capital and the pathway to becoming an investor can be pretty opaque. Growing up, I didn't know that being a venture capitalist could be a thing, that being an investor could be a thing. You were a doctor, a teacher, a lawyer, all those good things that people, that you'd be proud of, and everyone that you saw that was, doing well in life, became. So some of that is, helping people to understand the pathway, if you will, to becoming a venture capitalist, and helping them to not only discover that, but to get on it, and to help them understand what's important, the things that they need to focus on to do that. But the other thing that I think you guys are speaking about, which is really important to the founders and entrepreneurs, is tech talent, right? Data science, as you were talking about, and just other things that are engineers, all of the things that power the creation of these companies. And so we want to invest in and think about that as well. So at SoftBank, we've created 2 programs. I'll just highlight quickly. One is Data Science for All, and that's a training and mentorship program where we are looking to upskill talented individuals who want jobs or want to train for higher level jobs in data science or AI. And it's been a really successful program. We're looking to train 10,000 people in 3 years. This has been focused in Miami. And we're, as I said, we're iterating. So this was created, and we've also now partnered with Miami, one of the colleges in Miami, and they are actually able to get 16 credit hours, eligible to get 16 credit hours for going through this program that we created. So pretty impressive. The other is an operator school. So when we think about the talent that's needed to, not only to found these companies, but to, keep them, to run them and to run them well. We saw that as a problem, and we focused on that as well. And we have a number of classes and workshops that we've offered to help make the operators in these companies better at their jobs and to fill the gap in talent that's needed there, especially in Miami. So we've just had an overwhelming bit of success, with all of these programs, and we're excited about it. And I know we're over time, but I can't leave without saying another thing about the executive sponsorship, which is so very important when we talk about pipelines. Having people who are passionate and committed to this and willing to make sacrifices if necessary to move these programs forward is important. And I'm sure, like many of you, I've been a beneficiary of that. I actually came into SoftBank work as with the government affairs team. And my boss, Brian Conklin there, who many of you may know, was a huge advocate of this work and said, hey, listen, Tanya, you have skills that are really important that you can lend to this effort. And so, we as a team are going to, push you to do some of those things as well, and to help in the effort. And, and so he, along with the other folks in the organization, Shu Miyata, who had hoped to be with us today, who runs the Opportunity Fund, and our head of HR, are all sponsors as well. And so I think that's just really important when you think about pipeline. People have to be committed to it. They have to be intentional, and you need that in your leaders. And if you don't have that, it can just become an initiative that sits on the shelf.
Yeah, these great leaders are hard to find, and especially organization-wide, they're hard to find. And then to be actually a direct report to one of those managers is just really rare. So fortunately, looks like we are in a place where we've had mentors, and we want to ensure that folks who are younger than us have the same types of opportunities, which is why I'm so glad CHCI is putting on this panel today. Now it's time to move on to audience questions. What are some lessons learned? What has been successful, and what? I think we've been talking about this, but can you tell us a story of when, you don't have to name names. I mean, it doesn't have to be your current company, but can you tell a story of when you tried to pursue a particular initiative and you got pushback and it was really frustrating for you? Alrighty. I'd love to hear more, Tanya. You mentioned your government experience. What are some, let's kind of zero in on how public and private sectors can work together. Another question from the audience to create these types of initiatives without feeling overregulated.
Well, I was going to say, that's what people worry about as soon as you start talking about government involvement. But it's really important to have these partnerships, right? There are training programs that government provides. There are a lot of things that they actually do to just seed the ground for private companies to come in and to do the work that helps in or to partner and amplify the work that private companies are doing to advance diversity and inclusion across the board. I think one thing they can do certainly is to incentivize, right? So not to mandate, but to incentivize. And I think that allows companies to do things and to gain momentum, not just for the individual companies, but for the sectors as well. I think another thing that government does, really well is gatherings and convenings, bringing attention to issues, spotlighting it, and that's something that members of Congress and in the executive branch can do. because this is an issue that, is something I think we all know, right? Like George Floyd's murder wasn't, a moment where everyone was like, wow, what's going on here, right? This is something that's been, that has been under the surface for a while. And I think that attention and focus from government and thinking about the Biden administration, making it a part of the core of what they do across the board is really important in terms of leadership. And it can help all of us to do better and understand that it isn't something that should be off to the side or put on top of or done for a moment. It is something that is core to everything that we do. It belongs in everything that we do. We should think about it. And I think that's just a really important thing that the government's doing right now and to help companies.
And Jennifer,
Joe, I can answer the other question, the conflict one. I just had to think about it.
Sure. Go ahead. I have another one
so
here they want me to ask. So we've got about 4 minutes left. So if you can do that, and then
Okay, I'll
I
keep
want to
it
get to
short.
this last one if you can.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of conflict, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty we can all talk about. In my previous company, I was a hiring manager, and I had to really advocate for going to conferences to recruit from, for example, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. That's actually a conference I came out of and started my career in tech. A lot of times these conferences require a massive amount of budget and sponsorship. And so getting recruiting diversity teams to really take that seriously and use those forums as a way to build pipeline, especially of Latinx pipeline and engineering, sometimes that takes a lot of convincing. And again, why executive sponsorship is so important. And then another point, when I did finally, get to the conference and recruit, I had a pipeline of Latinx engineers ready to apply and go through the interview process. They actually did. And luckily, I was a hiring manager on the board to make final decisions whether they got the role or not. And if I could say, if I wasn't the hiring manager, they probably wouldn't have gotten the job. And so we can talk a lot about building pipeline, and I think that's excellent, all the things that we're doing, but we have to look at the other side of the coin and make sure that we have a diverse panel of hiring managers that can be advocates and really fight for, non-traditional, or in some cases, non-traditional candidates for roles. And so that's really important that I wanted to bring up, because we really have to make sure we're covering both sides of the coin there.
And Asha, what is your recruitment team doing, or any of you, to work locally, and how can we make more of a local effort to recruit? What are some of the best practices there?
Yeah, so specifically from a recruiting perspective, I like to say that we have a multi-lever approach to how we go about doing our recruiting. So obviously, we recruit at our HBCUs and our Hispanically serving institutions as well, to focus on really going in. So when you think about how do you improve your pipeline or your funnel of entry level or university talent, it's really going to those universities where those individual underrepresented talented engineers are. So that's one of the ways in which we do recruiting. From a perspective of our industry talent or our more experienced hires, I would say we partner with organizations from a employer branding and recruiting marketing perspective to really, again, hone in on those specific, to target and build relationships with those organizations in effort to build our pipeline and secure hires. So it's more than just a pipeline. It's how do we bring those individuals through our funnel. So it's really staffing our recruiting teams, and not just staffing, but training them on what it means to mitigate bias. So training and building capability for our recruiters, but also our people managers, because ultimately, once we recruit, we still need hiring managers to say yes to Latinos, or say yes to the Black engineers that are coming that may not have the specific experience that they're used to, but they are more than capable to do the job as well. So really honing in on eliminating, mitigating bias, and then investing in underrepresented talent.
Perfect. And look at that, right on time. We've got about 6 minutes to go, and we want to keep it 1 minute per person. So please help us out. What are your final thoughts and final ideas you'd like to leave with us today? And we'll start with Gustavo. We haven't heard from you, and then we start with Tanya and just go down the line.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. It's so important, and this has been really great. I've taken some notes on a number of things that the different organizations are doing. So I'd love to stay in contact and really think about best practices and be a thought partner with all of you. I just think that what's important here also that this is contributing to is continuing the momentum, right? One of the things that you talked about with challenges of bias and other things. I think we're at SoftBank are helping to dispel myths and help people to understand their biases and things as well by highlighting and demonstrating success. Right? Nothing is more. Everyone wants to be a part of something successful, and I think that that's a really important thing that we're doing. Also, in doing this work, we're encouraging others to engage. As Gustavo said, I think we can't do this alone. And so I think by partnering and thinking about, how we can do things better and faster, something venture capital is really good at. I think that, we can hopefully, get there faster to a day where we don't need funds like the Opportunity Fund, where it's just a part of what everyone's doing and considering. So I'm just excited to be a part of this great company that's really making approaching this and thinking about the business case for doing this. It's not just the right thing to do. It's it's a profitable thing to do. It's you have better performance. You're able to recruit better talent, and it's just so important. So just excited again to be a part of the conversation and a part of the work that's moving things forward so that we have more diverse voices in our companies and in our technology. And we're solving problems for all people, not just those who are currently in a space where they are creating companies and directing funds.
Wonderful. And we've got about less than 2 minutes to get everybody else in. So Gustavo, start with you.
Yeah, I think it's important that we think about why equity in technology isn't so important. There are a lot of industries and a lot of places where inequities show up, but why is technology so critical, right? And I think these historical inequities are ultimately about durable forms of power that have crossed generations, right? And they're going to take generations to resolve. And the most foundational power is the power to build the future. The future has to be built, and it has to be built by somebody. The question is, who is going to build it? Who's going to get to set the parameters for how we interact with and live in that future world? We have to ensure that all people have access to that act of creation, which is increasingly dependent on and reflected in the world of technology, right? And if we're going to include Latinos in that act of creating the future, we need to meet them where they're at. So, we need to create programs that leverage the strengths that are already present in the Hispanic and Latino community and help them build on those successes, right? Meeting them where they're at, maybe, to Jennifer's point, non-traditional routes, right? That might mean interacting with community colleges, the way we're doing with our recent cyber skilling effort in cybersecurity, right? Like you have to think outside of the box, and you have to meet people where they're at. So, let's do that. Let's learn about what the real struggles and issues for the Hispanic and Latino community are, and try to really address the root causes and meet our Hispanic and Latino brothers and sisters where they are.
Well, right now the struggle is getting you all to stay under 1 minute.
Yeah,
1 minute or less.
Okay, so I love what Tanya said.
Thank you, Gustavo.
Let me know. Okay,
Sorry.
I'll build off of what Tanya said. There's a delay. She mentioned that there isn't a pipeline problem. And I love that, because companies that are saying there's a pipeline problem are not looking in the right places. We've talked about HSIs. There's programs like MLT for MBA graduates, Cristo Rey, which hires high school students to work in tech companies. Imagine when they graduate from high school, they have a resume already of 4 years of tech experience. So I think companies that are saying this, are are not looking in the right places, we don't have a pipeline problem. And I'll also say leverage ERGs, DIBS groups. We are a group of passionate people about this topic and wanting to make change within our own companies, even though we're 5% of the industry. There's a lot of work to do, and we have to do it together. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
And last but not least, Asha.
Thank you, Joe. So I just say that DoorDash is certainly committed to leading the way in this space. So I would say we were first in our industry to take the White House Employers for Pay Equity Pledge. Another first is being one of the companies to sign the action to catalyze tech just a few weeks ago. And that's really centered around tech companies finding a way to share best practices and lead to change from a tech perspective. And how do we galvanize together from a DEI perspective and increase the representation of underrepresented talent in tech? So what I'd like to leave with is that DoorDash is intentional about how we get better, 1% better every day from a DEI perspective, and specifically for this topic, for tech talent in underrepresented groups.
Well, you're all here because you have fantastic reputations. So thank you so much for your hard work in this space. A lot of us have been doing it a long time, and I know that it can be difficult. So I thank you for your service working in these organizations and navigating these issues. So thank you so much for presenting and speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you for having us.
And in the audience, please be sure to keep tweeting about the Tech Summit at CHCI Summit. And we'll have more great sessions this afternoon, including our digital schools. You definitely want to be there for that. We'll be talking about the digital divide, virtual reality of now, and new trends in technology. And if you know anyone who wants to join the discussion, please ask them to register for free at chci.org. Thank you, everyone, and be well. And looking forward to seeing you and speaking to you again soon. Take care.